A 13-year-old boy slept in that room all night. Anna's body was under the bed. He had no idea. I need you to sit with that image for a second before we go anywhere else. A 13-year-old kid on a family vacation cruise goes back to his cabin late at night. His stepbrother blocks the door, tells him to wait outside, says he's changing. The kid thinks it's weird, but whatever. Eventually gets let in. Goes to sleep, and under the bed, a few feet away from where he's sleeping, is his 18-year-old half-sister. Already dead, hidden there. He doesn't know. He sleeps the whole night. That detail, out of everything in this case, is the one that won't leave me alone, and there are a lot of details in this case that are hard to shake. Timothy Hudson is 16 years old. He is accused of strangling his stepsister Anna Kepner to death aboard a Carnival cruise ship during a family vacation. He is accused of sexually assaulting her before she died, and for months after being charged, he was living freely with a family member in Florida while his case worked through the court system. That changed this week. He is now in jail. A federal judge signed off on pretrial detention, writing in the order that the danger posed by what he's accused of is sufficient by itself to require that he be locked up until trial. That a defendant charged on probable cause with deliberately taking a human life and sexually assaulting his victim presents a danger that no curfew or monitor can be trusted to contain. So today, we are going through everything. Who Anna Kepner was, what the FBI found on that ship, the surveillance footage timeline that is genuinely one of the most damning sequences of evidence I have ever walked through in a case like this, the DNA twist that changes the entire motive picture. And the question that I keep coming back to, that I think is actually the most important one in this whole case. How did a family put these two people in the same room? Let's go. Anna Kepner was 18 years old. She was the kind of person who documented her life on social media the way a lot of teenagers do. TikTok, photos, the ordinary stuff of being young and figuring out who you are. She was on this cruise with her family, including her dad Christopher and his wife Chantel, who was Timothy Hudson's biological mother. Think about that family structure for a second because it matters. Anna's dad had remarried. His new wife had a son, Timothy, who was 16. So Timothy was Anna's stepbrother. They were not blood related. They were connected through their parents' marriage. The sleeping arrangements on this cruise ship are where everything starts to feel wrong in retrospect. Anna, who was 18, was sharing cabin 8343 with her 13-year-old half-brother and with Timothy. Two teenage boys and their 18-year-old stepsister in the same cabin. Across the hall, in a separate cabin, were Anna's dad and his wife and two younger stepsisters. Now, here is the detail that the former boyfriend of Anna confirmed, and that according to reporting several people in the family's orbit were aware of. Timothy had what people described as a creepy obsession with Anna. He acted strangely around her. She knew it. The family knew it. The grandparents knew it, and they put them in the same room. I'm not going to spend this entire video on that point, because the trial hasn't happened yet, and there's a lot we don't know about what conversations happened or didn't happen before this vacation. But I also can't just gloss over it because it is, in the opinion of the former prosecutor who analyzed this case, part of how this happened. Quote, "You have clueless family members who just enabled this, who were shown red flags and yet put them all together in the same room while they went out partying and ignoring reality." That's not me editorializing. That's a former state attorney describing what the evidence suggests. Anna Kepner deserved better than that, and I think it's important to say it directly before we get into everything else. The cruise departed Miami on November 2nd. The family sailed to multiple spots in the Caribbean, Cozumel in Mexico among them. By most accounts, the trip was going normally for the first several days. Then, November 7th happened. That morning, crew members went to clean cabin 8343, and they found Anna's body. She had been wrapped in a blanket. She had been stuffed under the bed. Investigators wrote in their documents that it appeared someone had tried to hide her. The FBI was called. Cruise ship crimes in international waters fall under federal jurisdiction, which is part of why this case is so unusual, and I'll come back to that. Agents boarded the ship, interviewed family members, and then they pulled the surveillance footage. And what that surveillance footage showed, minute by minute, is where this case becomes devastating for the defense. Let me walk you through the timeline exactly as the FBI documented it. 7:35 in the evening on the night Anna died. Timothy Hudson goes to cabin 8343, 7:38 p.m. Anna Kepner is seen entering that same cabin. That is the last time anyone sees her alive. 7:51 p.m. The 13-year-old half-brother tries to enter the room. He is blocked at the door. Timothy puts his arm out, tells him, "Wait, don't come inside." The kid notices the lights are all on. The bathroom door and closet doors are open. It feels strange to him. He waits in the hallway. Eventually, Timothy lets him back in, and then apparently forces him to wait outside again at some point later. Now here's where the footage becomes something else entirely. 10:13 p.m. Timothy Hudson exits the cabin, and at this moment, he does something he does not do at any other point on the entire surveillance record when leaving that room. He looks left, he looks right, he checks the hallway to make sure no one is watching before he steps out. One time. That one time only. The FBI noted this specifically. He goes in and out of the cabin multiple times between 10:13 and 10:49. At 10:53, he puts a privacy sign on the door. Just after 11 p.m., he goes back into the cabin. 11:21 p.m., the 13-year-old goes into the cabin. He tells the FBI later that he did not see his sister inside. 11:23 p.m., he leaves. Timothy goes in and out again at 11:44. Then just after midnight. Then at 12:09 a.m., the 13-year-old tries to get back into the cabin again. And this is when Timothy allegedly blocks him again, tells him to wait in the hallway, forces him to stay out. Eventually, that 13-year-old goes back inside the room and goes to sleep. Anna's body is under the bed. He sleeps there all night. The next morning, the crew finds her. And what happens next on that surveillance footage, after her body has been discovered, after there is commotion outside the door of that very cabin, is one of the more chilling things I've read in documenting a case like this. Timothy Hudson walks by the room. He can see people inside. There is clearly something happening. This is the room he has been staying in. His stepsister's body has just been found. He does not look. He looks straight ahead and keeps walking. The FBI's note in the documents is something like, "You would expect anyone passing a room where there was significant commotion involving their own family to at least look, unless they already knew what was inside." Now let's talk about Anna's phone, because this is where the evidence against Timothy Hudson goes from damning to almost airtight. Anna was the kind of teenager who had her phone with her constantly. After her body was found, her phone was missing. The FBI eventually located it in the ship's Lost and Found. A crew member had found it in a trash bin. It was damaged, smashed. Here is what the surveillance footage shows. 9:26 in the morning, the day after Anna died. Timothy leaves the cabin. 9:48, he comes back. 9:50, he leaves again. He appears to have something in his hand. 9:52 a.m. Timothy Hudson allegedly puts his hands into the same trash bin where Anna's phone is later recovered. And then the FBI did something that sealed it. They pulled the GPS data from Anna's phone. They tracked which routers on the ship it connected to as it moved. And the route that phone took through the ship to that trash bin matches exactly the route Timothy Hudson took on the surveillance cameras. He allegedly carried her phone off her body, walked it through the ship, and dumped it in a trash bin. And the GPS tracked the whole thing. A former prosecutor who reviewed the documents put it simply: who does that unless you're the one who murdered Anna Kepner? The cause of death was strangulation. And I want to be direct about this because I think the clinical language of these documents can sometimes obscure how violent this actually was. The strangulation was so forceful, so sustained, that Anna Kepner's eardrums ruptured. The pressure from the chokehold was intense enough to cause her eardrums to pop. There was severe bruising around her neck, severe bruising around her ears. This was not a brief struggle. This was prolonged, deliberate. She was 18 years old. Now the DNA. Because there is a twist here that the defense will almost certainly try to use. And I want to explain why prosecutors believe it actually strengthens their case rather than weakening it. A rape kit was conducted. The results came back with a DNA match to Timothy Hudson. consistent with the charges against him. But there was also a second DNA contributor. Someone the documents refer to only as a minor witness, a boy from out of state who investigators say had intercourse with Anna on the cruise. Now on the surface, a defense attorney hears that and immediately thinks alternate suspect. Unknown male DNA. Different person could have done this. Here is why prosecutors believe that argument falls apart. The surveillance footage shows only 3 people entering cabin 8343 that evening. Anna, Timothy, and the 13-year-old half-brother who has been ruled out as a DNA contributor and who, by all accounts, was being blocked from the room and eventually slept there unknowingly. The other DNA contributor, this boy from out of state, there is zero evidence connecting him to any act of violence. No footage of him near the cabin. No evidence of anything except what the documents describe as consensual intercourse with Anna at some earlier point during the cruise. But here is the part that the former prosecutor raised that I think reframes the entire case. That second DNA contributor may actually explain the motive. If Timothy Hudson, who by multiple accounts had an obsessive fixation on his stepsister, discovered that she had been with someone else on this cruise, that could be what triggered what happened in that cabin on the evening of November 7th. The prosecution's theory, in other words, is not random violence. It is a 16-year-old with a documented obsession who found out something that enraged him and acted on that rage in the most brutal way imaginable. Timothy Hudson has reportedly told family members that he does not remember what happened the night Anna died. I'll let you sit with that claim against the backdrop of everything the surveillance footage documents. The checking of the hallway before leaving. The phone he allegedly carried to a trash bin. The blocking of the door. The privacy sign. The 13-year-old sleeping feet away from where he allegedly hid her body. He doesn't remember. Where this case goes next is genuinely significant from a legal standpoint, and not just because of how horrific the allegations are. This case is being prosecuted federally. Because it happened in international waters on a cruise ship, it falls under federal rather than state jurisdiction. And federal prosecution of a juvenile is rare. Genuinely rare. Most cases involving minors, even serious ones, go through state systems. The federal government dealing with a 16-year-old defendant is unusual enough that legal analysts have pointed to it specifically as one of the things that makes this case different from almost anything that has come before it. Timothy Hudson was initially charged as a juvenile, which meant everything was sealed. His name, the details, all of it kept from the public. Then, his case was moved into federal adult court. And once that happened, the charges and the details became part of the public record. For months after that transfer, he was living with a family member in Florida under court-ordered conditions. A curfew, monitoring. But not jail. The federal judge who allowed that arrangement said at the time that part of the reason he wasn't ordering immediate detention was the practical challenge of finding an appropriate facility for someone Hudson's age that was reasonably close to where his family lives. There was also the fact that Hudson had not violated any of his conditions during the time he'd been in the juvenile system. This week, that changed. The judge signed a detention order. The language in that order is not subtle. It describes what Hudson is accused of as sufficient by itself to require detention. It states that a defendant charged with deliberately taking a human life and sexually assaulting his victim presents a danger that no monitor or placement can be trusted to contain. He is now in Citrus County Jail in Florida, north of Tampa. He will remain there until trial. I want to come back to something before we close, because I think it's the part of this story that deserves more attention than it's gotten. Anna Kepner was not put in danger by a stranger. She was not randomly targeted. She was on a family vacation, in a cabin that her family arranged with a stepbrother that people in her life had noticed behaving strangely around her for some time. Her ex-boyfriend apparently told investigators that Timothy had acted in a creepy way around Anna, that he was obsessed with her, that she was aware of it, that the family seemed to look the other way. I don't know all the details of what conversation happened or didn't happen before this trip. I don't know what the parents knew specifically or how seriously they took whatever warning signs existed. A trial hasn't happened. There are things we don't know yet. But I do know that an 18-year-old girl went on a family vacation and ended up wrapped in a blanket under a bed in a shared cabin, and that the person accused of putting her there was someone her family chose to place in that room with her. Anna's biological father was also on this cruise, in a separate cabin. Legal analysts have raised the question of whether he could potentially pursue civil action, both against the family members who made those arrangements and potentially against Carnival Cruise Lines for what more, if anything, could have been done on the security side. Those are questions for courts to sort out later. What isn't a legal question is this. Anna Kepner was 18 years old. She had her whole life documented on TikTok the way kids do. She went on a trip that was supposed to be a vacation, and she never came home. Timothy Hudson is 16. If convicted of what he's charged with, he is going to spend a very significant portion of his life in federal prison. The question of what justice looks like when the defendant is a teenager and the crime is this brutal is one the court system is now going to have to answer. I'll be following this case as it develops. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe. See you in the next one.